Good evening. Today is July 22nd, 2015, special board meeting of the Hyde Park Central School District Board of Education. May I have a motion? Oh, first we have to have the Pledge of Allegiance, sorry. New format. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A new format?
Yeah, new year, new format.
Just
I forgot.
this one?
Yes, you're supposed
So
to
then,
open up, pledge allegiance, and then exactly.
so then no one in the public will ever see us do pledge? Is that,
Unless,
what? I mean, do we have to do it this way?
You really should do it when you open the meeting.
But if we don't have to, I think we'll take a lot of hits for
I'm
not saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
How we really need to do the agenda, and that executive sessions allegedly aren't supposed to be planned. But the concern I have is just that. I think people will think, why aren't they doing the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yeah.
Well, we did, but you missed
okay.
it.
Right.
You know, and I don't think that's a place I want to go. I'd
Yeah.
rather be maybe not technically correct with the agenda and showing patriotism than the alternative.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
So.
So, at this point, may I have a motion to enter executive session to discuss personnel matter?
So moved. Second.
All, any discussion? All in favor? We're now in
Very
executive session. Very quick.
Since I had them here.
At this time, may I have a motion to return to general session, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. There are no agenda modifications, so may I have a motion to adopt the agenda as listed?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That brings us to 5.1, train equipment and controls proposal.
Yeah, and as Elliot's coming up, I'll just recap a little. The last time we spoke, we were looking at our Haviland Middle School heating project. There were some delays involved in state ed approval, et cetera. And when we went out to bid, we were a little bit over what the voter authorization was. So we went back to the drawing board. We looked at several different options, and we actually realized that the train equipment can be purchased outside of the two bids for electric and mechanical. And so that was one question. Is there anything we can not have that isn't dependent on the bid process? And in fact, the bids were designed as such that we could look at it that way. The next question was, where could we find the funding? And there's all kinds of rules around, you know, use of fund balance in the purchasing of equipment. But and thanks to Linda, after some excruciating minutes and 10 minutes and conversations and half hour, an hour, and racking our brains, Linda realized we have an inter-transfer fund capital project sitting in our budget, and it can be used for this purpose. It was not quite enough to cover the whole cost, but we can apply some of our technology equipment funding to offset that. So we were short approximately $334,000. We're taking 105 from technology, and just to remind everybody, we've got $2.6 million waiting to spend in technology through the voucher program through New York State. So it's not going to really negatively affect our technology budget either this year or in the future, and we can build it back in if we need it. So we extracted the train equipment, and the proposal is to utilize existing funds for the train equipment and then move on to the bid awards for the remainder of the project.
Okay. Elliot, it's all yours.
I'm not sure he has anything
Oh.
left
I
to
I don't have a
say.
whole lot to add to that.
Other than answering
Anybody,
questions.
anybody have any
questions.
questions?
Stealing
Stealing
his
his thunder.
I've got some questions if you have nothing to say.
I'm sure I can come up with something.
I could fill you up. The train controls, that wasn't part of the base bid, was it?
No.
Controls?
The controls were
Was-
never intended to be part of the base
That was
bid.
something you were gonna do O&M originally, as far as the funds
We always planned on doing the controls off of the state OGS contract.
of the state?
Mhm.
Okay. And on the equipment, I looked at the numbers on both. The equipment is higher than the alternate bid from the HVAC bidder.
Slightly,
That's
yes.
all.
And there's just
30,000, yeah.
there's a caveat to that, and that's if we didn't go with the train equipment, then the controls number would have gone up approximately $100,000 because there's savings there built into the factory-produced, factory-mounted controls from train on the equipment. So I don't know if that's clear.
No, it's not clear.
The train equipment number is what it is, and the train control number is what it is if they're bundled together. If we took the equipment alternate from the vendor, the train equipment number off of state contract would have had to go up about $100,000. The train control number, I'm sorry, would have gone up about $100,000 because it would have to compensate for what's not included in the factory installed equipment that they were offering us.
Well, we should have had that explanation. You're talking $100,000?
It's a big difference.
From 300, no, let's see, it was 198, something like that. From 198, it would bounce up that much?
They estimated that with what they were including in the factory-mounted factory-mounted controls on the equipment as part of their equipment package, if we chose to not go with that equipment package, we would have to raise the control number approximately $100,000 to compensate for what may not be included by the bidding contractor's subcontractor.
The other question I have, is that for the entire building, the controls?
Yes, that
Just-
actually includes bringing the C-section into the same control system.
The whole building itself is going to be ran under train controls?
Correct.
The entire building?
That's correct.
That's what, there's an alternate, right? Wasn't there a?
There was an alternate of 34,000. Bill and I were able to negotiate the base number down to absorb that 34,000 and still bring us under the original number. So the number that you see on the memo of 312,639.45 does include that project alternate to bring the entire building under one umbrella. One of the biggest challenges in a project like this is conflicting controls.
And that's the state contract price is the 300,000?
That's correct. That's correct.
I don't know if you have the answer, maybe Linda does. Is that aidable?
That I can't speak to.
No,
Okay.
I don't believe it's.
The other
illegal.
would be aidable.
I'm sorry?
This isn't aidable because we're using Tran, but if we went with a contractor, that would be aidable.
The equipment is still being purchased. Approximately 65% of it is still being purchased out of the capital budget, which is aidable. We're only paying $100,000 out of operating expenses, which is not aidable, and the entire controls is being paid out of the capital budget. So we're only losing 8 on the 105 that we transferred.
Okay, that was my
Yeah,
Good
so
question.
anything that's coming out of capital
Right.
funds is aidable at our rate,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
I guess the only one question I had, have you reviewed or had conversation with Forrest about any requirements on his department?
Absolutely.
for-
It's a virtual server. The train tracer system, it operates in the cloud, and it does require virtual storage space. We did discuss everything from data closet locations, switch locations. The exact needs on the data side were discussed with our tech department before we committed to this proposal.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Rough idea, how many points in the control system, do you know?
Approximately 15 per unit. Overall, I'd have to do the math, but there's 15 per unit ventilator, roughly.
Just wondered, has anybody done a calculation as to what that works out to be a cost per point?
Under the new number, I'd have to adjust it. We were estimating $500 per point
Yeah, that's
in
what I
the
was looking
budget.
for. Is it within that range?
It's lower because of the negotiated discount.
Okay.
I've got a question on the subcontract electrician price.
Yes,
That's in these two proposals. And you're using the same electrician that got the electrical bid, that's gonna get the electrical bid,
that's correct.
correct? There's no interchangeable service there?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the
Is
question.
one separate from the other,
As far as?
as far as the controls are, the equipment tie-ins? I mean, we're gonna sign a contract already for electrical service, which I'm assuming include tie-in to the units.
Right, the electrical service, if I'm understanding the question, on the train proposals is independent of the electrical bid on the project.
Two separate scopes.
Correct.
You've got a control scope, and then you've got a,
Right, this is data and this is data lines and power to the controls equipment versus power to all of the unit ventilators and additional fans and such that
Well,
are being put in the
the
project.
second proposal for equipment got nothing to do with the controls, so there's a cost in there, sub-cost in there for electrician on the equipment itself.
On the train
And
equipment?
train, yes.
Well, there's, I believe there's control equipment on both. It's just a lesser number. And I have to Bill, yeah, he can speak to that.
Well, I think, I don't have it in front of me here, but the one was for $48,000. Was that on the equipment, Bill, you know?
I believe it was on controls. I can look.
yeah, the
though.
control total for electric is 48,358. So that's a subcontractor to the state contract through Train.
Right, right.
So
I
they're
understand that.
doing,
I'm just wondering, make sure they didn't intertwine with the capital.
no, I think you've got two different scopes. I mean, you got a scope that's defined in the construction documents that is primarily line
One's low voltage, one's
your line voltage for the
Right.
line voltage.
Okay.
power to the equipment.
The line voltage is the 133, and then the data and low voltage would be under the control.
So if, just a hypothetical here, if we used S&O alternate for equipment, we'd have to get another cost from the electrical contractor to tie that in?
Lou, can you move to the mic? Thanks. Thanks so much.
The tie-in is not associated, when you look at what Salsto was doing, that had nothing to do with the equipment itself. He's just bringing data in.
Yeah, but you're not gonna, if we don't use train, let's say, for equipment, and you've got that you've got that electrical work need, whether it be low voltage or whatever. If you went with S&O's contract for equipment, who would do the service for the low voltage for that? It's not in the base bid, is it?
It was part of the alternate.
That's part of what, that's part of that price we were saying that Train was gonna have to increase their control number, because then they're going to be doing that wiring of those controls, okay? For the extra the other 100,000 if you didn't go with their equipment, because they're doing some of that work all in the factory. There's still some work associated with that has to be done in the field.
Right.
So if Train didn't get the equipment, they would have to adjust their control number, which would include that wiring, that low voltage wiring, that's included in that equipment price.
Well, we needed that explanation. That should have came forth before, actually. You're talking $100,000.
Yes.
Okay.
And again, part of the rationale of the going with Train for both controls and equipment was the opportunity to pick exactly what we needed and be able to get a discount based on that bundle package.
Any other questions?
I guess I would just ask one broad question. Any concern, confident that the scope is solid, that we've got no scope gaps, any gray areas, anything that you have any concerns with, or you're gonna tell me you're really happy with this and ready to go?
Honestly, Train was the most responsive vendor when we started out with this process. I can say that, I worked with Bill and Lou to find any other contractor that offered a similar package deal between controls and equipment. Everybody works through somebody else in this type of an environment. So typically on a lot of other projects, you'll have the controls guy pointing at the equipment guy, and anytime there's a disconnect in these projects, it tends to happen at that juncture. Train's been really responsive, not just with speccing out exactly what the equipment is that we need for per the bid spec, but also what's the most easily serviceable given the location and their willingness to train our staff, even beyond me to my mechanics, to bring sample units. So I'm pretty happy with the level of service being provided thus far, and we anticipate nothing but positive things going forward.
Okay.
Is Train the only one on state contract, the only vendor?
They're not the only vendor for equipment on state contract, but they're the only vendor that we found that offers equipment and controls under the same company.
Okay, so if we went with another vendor, you'd have the same scenario with Train as far as the controls.
Right, so if I went with, and I don't want to, put any company on blast that I
Right,
haven't
another
researched,
company.
but if company X was my equipment manufacturer, company Y would then be subbed out the controls from them, and they'd offer it through their contract, but they'd be bringing someone else to the table. Train's the only company that came forward that does it all in the same shop.
Okay.
Any discussion about sound decibel ratings on the univents? I mean, it's always a concern, making sure that you're not creating any excessive noise. Any?
Not specifically with Train. We have discussed our options for how the units are being hung and whether or not we're going with plenum or certain different types of ductwork to, offset some of that noise. But the
I
units
would
themselves are pretty standard.
Just encourage you to be, cognizant of that.
Appreciate that,
Anything
yeah.
you can do to keep sound down in the classroom, the better.
Certainly.
So we've got the GC on board for the windows and doors.
Correct.
There's an area of the heating area, I think it's the A wing, classroom wing. There's 6 classrooms that we're redesigning the heating system. We're changing the doors out, we're changing the window line out,
That's correct.
right? Is there any interference there because of delay in the project?
There have been issues. Obviously, the door and window contractor, if I'm understanding kind of what you're getting at, is they can't finish because
Right,
the
they can't
mechanicals aren't
finish
being
because
done.
of that.
The original intent was that they would start at the same time and finish together. We are working with the door and window contractor to get as much of their work substantially completed as possible without creating double work down the line.
Right.
So what we're looking to do is increase the thermal quality of the building by adding insulation. That was all part of the project, and changing out the doors and windows that we can. There are obviously some things that we'll not be able to complete. We will most likely be coming to the board with some sort of change order to delete those options if it comes down to that, adjusting their contract and then addressing those finished pieces at the end of next summer at the conclusion of the mechanical project.
Okay.
That's it? Anything else? All right, moving on to the consent agenda. May I have a motion for 6.1, the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. That brings us down to 7.1. I have a motion for budget transfers as noted in the agenda.
So move.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. And I have a motion for 7.2 capital project bid awards as for Phase 4A3 as listed in the agenda, please.
So moved. Second?
Any discussion on that?
Just one, and I may have missed it. What are we carrying as a contingency money going into the project based on
I believe we're
budget?
5%? 5%.
We've got 5% going in, okay.
All right, all in favor? Opposed? Thank you. And that brings us everybody's favorite. May I have a motion to adjourn, please? Adjourn, or join.
So moved.
Either one.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you very much.